Okay, so Raw kicked off the week, as it often does, and it was truly an abysmal way to start the week. This was another terrible Raw. After the slight reprieve, which was Shaq guest hosting Raw last week, which I maintain was a really, really bad show. It really was bad, but it was a big improvement from Seth Green and ZZ Top. This week's episode was back in the pits of hell again, and while it probably wasn't as bad overall as Seth Green and ZZ Top, Jerry Piven as guest host was worse. He is the worst guest host so far. He was really, really, really bad. Just this smug, charmless, cocky little fool. Clearly didn't care about wrestling even in the slightest. Not at all. Just there to promote his god-awful looking movie. Jeremy, no one wants to go see your movie. No one. No one wants to see a movie in which the script is clearly so bad that the best actor they could get in the lead role is some mediocre TV actor like you. Fuck off. Anyway, the promo that started Monday Night Raw was truly horrendous. Probably the worst moment of the week overall. It was just awful. Piven comes out with his childish sidekick, Dr. Ken. I don't think he's a real doctor. Shh. Dr. Ken was just this hideous little prick. And basically they just behaved like children for a while. Basically they're just stalling at the start of the show. It was about 5 minutes of stalling where they didn't really know what to say. So they just made all sorts of false promises about how this was going to be the greatest show ever and all sorts of crap like that. And they're behaving like children to the extent that Jeremy Piven actually put a dummy or a pacifier or whatever you want to call it in Dr. Ken's mouth. I mean, this was terrible. And then Piven ran up the ramp and set off the pyro and all this crap, and I was just like, oh my god. Then The Miz came out and things got a bit better. The Miz started talking about how Piven was making a mockery of Monday Night Raw, which I thought was interesting because it's the second time now the writers have had one of the heels say that the guest host is making a mockery of the show. So I'm wondering if that's expressing the writers' real feelings about these guest host idea. Who knows? I'll look out for it in the future anyway. And then The Miz says he's the real TV star because he was on some god-awful reality show, and Piven and Dr. Ken mock his reality show, and it's a bit of back and forth, and it's okay, it's bearable, just, but what it proved was that The Miz is a much better actor than Jeremy Piven and Dr. Ken. Anyway, The Miz says he wants a rematch with John Cena because Cena got lucky last week. Cena comes out, and the promo took a nosedive once again here. Cena was a disgrace in this promo. He was a true disgrace. Those of you who heard the Ken Anderson shoot interview, which I'll talk about in part 2, and I'll put a link to in the sidebar. Those of you who heard that will know that Kennedy basically intimated that John Cena won't put any young stars over because he's afraid they're going to steal his spot, basically. And that's what this promo proved. He buried The Miz. He truly, truly buried him. It was ridiculous. He just went, well, Piven, The Miz isn't really that good. And I was like, what? You don't say that. You can't say that. And then he went, everyone knows I could beat The Miz in about 20 seconds, so you're going to have to make this match interesting. I was like, no, you're not. This is like, you don't bury people with words. You really don't. Even Triple H, who buries everyone in the ring, he knows you don't bury people with words. When he was talking after the match about Legacy, he was like, are these guys really that good? No, they're fucking terrible. Just the same as you. But at least you know that you don't bury them on the mic. Same with Rey Mysterio, talking about Dolph Ziggler. Rey Mysterio was on commentary and he was talking about how great Ziggler was and all this stuff. Same with Chris Jericho. He always bigs up his opponents. You don't bury your opponents on the mic. It is so fucking rude and uncalled for. But that's what Cena did. So Cena said if Piven wants to make this match interesting, he's going to have to add some stipulations. And here, the promo managed to take a nosedive again. Because Jerry Piven didn't have a fucking clue what he was talking about. And he went, okay, if The Miz loses, he won't be allowed on Monday Night Raw ever again. Which I was fine with. And then he went, okay, if The Miz loses, then he won't be allowed to compete at the Summerfest. Not just Summerfest, the Summerfest. The Summerfest. This guy knows nothing. At the start of the night he claimed, oh, I've wanted to do this my whole life. No, you haven't. You've never watched wrestling before, have you? You have no idea. You didn't even have the fucking courtesy to read a sign on the way in that said SummerSlam. You're saying the Summerfest. You fucking asshole. This was such a horrible moment. It just showed how hollow the whole guest host idea is. How, you know, basically he's just doing it to promote his film and WWE are just doing it to promote their product and nothing. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the wrestling. So anyway, Cena Miz lumberjack match later on tonight. Wonder what's going to happen there. So Piven spends the rest of the night doing a lot of smug backstage segments, hanging around divas with Dr. Ken, pretending they're ladies' men. And there really are no matches of note on this. We get Chavo getting squashed by Mark Henry. And after the match, Mark Henry clicks his heels, and we're supposed to be impressed by that. He's supposed to be an athlete. We have Triple H lose to Legacy, and I was like, thank God Triple H lost a handicap match. But it was so boring. Kingston Big Show was equally boring. Swagger Born was okay, but the match kind of lost direction about halfway through, and the last minute of the match was just Swagger squashing Born, like really squashing him. He looked like one of Ezekiel Jackson's jobbers or something, which I didn't think was very good booking at all. We get to the main event, John Cena versus The Miz, which is a lumberjack match, and then Jerry Piven and Dr. Ken inexplicably turn heel, which was just so awful and made no sense at all. So all the lumberjacks are heels. So you're like, oh god, Miz is actually going to stay on Raw, which I didn't really want to happen. But no, Cena just squashed The Miz, went over all of WWE's top heels. Total Superman booking. Absolutely awful. After the match, Jerry Piven did the only good thing he'd done all night, which was a nice flying crossbody off the top rope, and Dr. Ken got thrown out of the ring and landed on his head, rather pleasingly. And that was Monday Night Raw. Truly, truly terrible. And The Miz going off Raw, he's probably going to go on SmackDown right now, and I think this is so worrying, the fact that the bookers clearly realise that The Miz should be a star, but they also realise that he's never going to get to be a star on Raw, because Triple H, John Cena, Randy Orton, Batista, they're never going to put him over. He's never going to be a big star. So they've decided to move him to SmackDown. Rather than sort the problem, which they can clearly see is there, they've decided just to move him to SmackDown and make him a star there. Fucking ludicrous. Anyway, then we had ECW, which was a welcome change of pace after Raw, which was just a joke. This was actually a really fun ECW, I enjoyed this. We had an opening promo, which was the Abraham Washington show, and this promo was god-awful. It was fucking terrible, but it had many redeeming features for me. For a start, they were trying to push Zack Ryder and Shelton Benjamin in the opening promo of the show. I thought that was great. Unfortunately, Zack Ryder was like, Shelton, you really think you're more entertaining than me? And I was just watching and I was like, God, you're both so unentertaining. You're both good wrestlers, but you're really boring. And it turned into a singing contest and it was awful. Then we had Ezekiel Jackson defeat a jobber, and the continuation of a guilty pleasure of mine. I actually quite like this Ezekiel Jackson Vladimir Kozlov feud, where they just basically destroy jobbers in front of each other. For some reason, I quite like it. I think it's because it's subverting the squash match genre, if you like. Rather than a squash match being a thing which is not involved in an angle, you know, a squash match is by nature not an angle. It's just, you know, look how powerful this guy is. They've actually made the squash match the angle. I kind of like that. As soon as they start fighting each other, that's going to be terrible, but I actually quite enjoy this right now. Plus, they both have quite good music. Anyway, then we had a brilliant backstage segment where the Hurricane rescued some woman from a thing that was moving really slowly, and then Paul Burchill just looked straight in the camera and went, "This is ridiculous," which was awesome. Then we had Sheamus Goldust again, another mediocre match between these pair. Then Christian versus Tommy Dreamer for the ECW Championship. Very good match, really enjoyed it. Yeah, so anyway, turn over to part 2, where we'll talk about Superstars, SmackDown, and the Ken Anderson interview. Okay, bye.